The beautiful game of football is dogged with historical errors that would stand the test of time by a country mile. The different generations that populate the earth have borne witness to truly majestic eras of football that have come to inform the current generation of footballers, both young and old. From Pelé and Maradona's odyssey that colored the 70s and 80s era of football, to Wenger and Ferguson going to war for British supremacy in the 2000s. Football is littered with historical figures and teams that will forever define its DNA. Amongst these historic teams is one of the pioneers that aided the ascension of the gripping early 1900s of women's football in England. This team, of course, is the famous Dick Kerr's ladies football team. Established in October 1917, the Dick Kerr ladies football team were right at the forefront of women's football as arguably one of the game's overall historic cornerstones. As the First World War raged on and the men lined themselves up against those who dared to threaten their rule, the women who stayed home became the backbone of the war effort. Munitions factories across the United Kingdom were kept running by women, who ensured that the soldiers abroad were always well equipped with the necessary tools of destruction required to keep the war effort going. These women were eventually nicknamed munitionettes, and they were a common fixture of munition factories all across the land. Amongst these factories was the Dick Kerr & Co. Limited Company in Preston, which was founded in 1898, and only a mere 19 years later would be the birthplace of the revolutionary women's football team. An ordinary day at an English munitions factory in World War I saw workers going about their daily tasks of working the complex machinery, carrying bags of coal on their backs to bring to the mines, and loading up shells with explosives at the expense of them contracting toxic jaundice. Given the toll of the painstaking daily work that they were regularly subjected to, the British government endeavoured to keep the general well-being and spirits of the munitionettes high through sporting activities. Indeed, even during the throes of World War I, football was a uniting factor even away from the front lines. As a result of this, the munitions factories across England began to house football teams that mainly consisted of women who would go tete-a-tete against one another in friendly matches organized between factory owners. What started off as a morale booster for the workers soon turned into a regular fixture of charity matches, utilized to raise funds towards the war effort, as women's football began to attract public attention. As this yet unrecognized revolution began to slowly roar into life, it would be the Dick Kerr ladies football team who would shift things to a higher gear and soon announce themselves to the big stage. Just like how night follows day, it is often regarded that at least physically, men are superior to women. Imagine then just how startling it would be to the eyes to see a full-blown battle of the genders take place in Penwitham, near the Dick Kerr & Co. factory. This is exactly what met the transfixed eyes of the factory that day in October 1917, where a lunchtime argument between Grace Sibbert and some male counterparts erupted due to Sibbert's remarks about the men's team's recent run of poor results. With masculine pride at stake, the gauntlet was thrown towards Sibbert, who famously remarked, "Come on girls, let's give it a go. It'll be a laugh." And though the outcome of the match is lost to the annals of history, a footballing juggernaut in the women's game was born. Little time would pass before the plucky women's team from Preston went from unknown to unbelievable, as they fervently ascended from playing Christmas charity matches with neighboring munitions factory workers to being held aloof by swathes of supporters who admired the raucous performances that were being put on display for their sole viewing pleasure. Whether it's domestic rivals or challenges from foreign nations, no team stood a chance against the impressive might of Dick Kerr's ladies, who boasted some of the most recognizable female footballers of the time, such as Lily Parr. The crescendo of the Kerr's ladies came in 1920 against St. Helens ladies on Boxing Day, which drew a crowd of 53,000 strong, which was recently bettered by the Women's El Clasico in the Women's Champions League quarter-final between Barcelona and Real Madrid. This Boxing Day fixture is arguably the ultimate mark of greatness for Kerr's ladies, as such a feat was simply unheard of back then, and this is only when one considers attendances for both men and women's football. The only was up for the femme fatales, and nothing seemed to stand in their way up until the eventual ban in 1921. The aftermath of the ban saw the formation of the previously discussed English Ladies Football Association, who saw it fit to defy the ban and continue women's involvement in the beautiful game. However, there was a noticeable omission from the founding member clubs of the LFA, as Dick Kerr's ladies were nowhere to be found. Though the team's manager at the time, Alfred Franklin, had shown interest in the ELFA by planning to go to the inaugural meeting in Liverpool. The club was ultimately reluctant to commit themselves to being members. Many reasons as to why this happened have been presented. By far the most plausible was the rule in the ELFA that restricted players to only playing for teams that were no more than 20 miles away from their home. This may not seem like much of a big deal upon initial thought, but if you dig a little deep into the lineup of Dick Kerr's ladies, you will discover that some of the players had been cherry-picked from all across the English land to such a degree that Dick Kerr's ladies would have been absolutely devastated personnel-wise if they had opted to join the English Ladies Football Association. Without the freedom to play in familiar grounds and without a league to compete in, Dick Kerr's ladies will ultimately resign to look outside of England for somewhere to call home. Though it seemed bleak, Franklin defiantly declared that his team will continue to play if the organizer of charity matches will provide grounds, even if we have to play on plowed fields. And just like any feel-good story, the troops rallied. With the ban on women's football being in full effect, the ladies traveled across the pond to the United States of America for a series of games that would have also had them travel to Canada, were it not for the Dominion Football Association's order which objected female football players, just like in England. Though it was a far cry from the many spectators that they had witnessed at their peak, Dick Kerr's ladies still attracted healthy crowds which ranged from 4,000 to 10,000 people per match. This was likely helped by the intrigue that came with the fact that the ladies were not playing female opposition, but rather their male counterparts. And also the default conclusion would be that it would have been a walk in the park for the men. If you had been paying attention to the humble beginnings of the team, you'd have noted that gender was a non-factor for this team, as evidenced by the results of winning, drawing, and losing 3 matches whilst in the USA. The ladies refused to bow to anyone, and the headlines were full of adulatory praises of Dick Kerr's ladies being one of the biggest things in soccer ever to have visited the United States. With a renewed sense of vigor, the Dick Kerr's ladies team returned to Europe and continued to go about their business as you would. In spite of the FA ban, the crowd still came to lay their eyes upon this generational team. The team's reputation eventually came to precede them, as they were regularly marketed as world champions, even though this only became a real fact when they beat the Scottish women champions, the Edinburgh ladies, 5-1 in 1937. The defiance of Dick Kerr's ladies team ultimately helped them to withstand the majority of the FA's ban on women's football, and more interestingly, to even withstand the longevity of the ELFA, which folded within a year of its inception. This defiance, however, eventually ran its course as a whirlwind of events such as the breakout of the Second World War and the death of Alfred Franklin in 1957 compelled to eventually force the team to disband in 1965, a mere 4 years before the ban on women's football in England would be lifted. Though Dick Kerr's ladies ultimately failed to hang in just a little bit longer, the legendary story is immortalized in the history of football and has even become adapted in mass media, which has only served to spread the story of the women's football institution, which dared to defy not only the odds, but the man as well.